Hey everyone, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to discuss TNA or GFW or Impact Wrestling, whatever they're being called, Slammiversary 2017. I will be discussing the pay-per-view and giving my thoughts. I did in fact buy the pay-per-view on the Fight TV app, watched it on the computer, did the live coverage on NoDQ.com. No issues with watching the pay-per-view and the live stream was fine. Overall, I thought that up until the last two matches, this was perhaps the best TNA pay-per-view in many years. I really enjoyed this show for the first 2 hours and 15 minutes. It was total nonstop action. It was like old school TNA. You had one fast-paced match after another. You had finishes that made sense. It felt like perhaps there was a little bit of hope, a little ray of hope for this company moving forward. But after the last two matches, I'm not so sure. So let's go ahead and break down this card. First off, the commentary team. Big improvement. Unfortunately, this appears to be a one-off thing, and this coming Thursday, it's going to be back to Josh Matthews and Jeremy Borash. I think that needs to change. Robert Flores, he was pretty good. Not great, but at the same time, this was his first show. And I think for a first-time performance, he did very well. I think the real story here was Don West. Don West came back for this show, and I thought he did a tremendous job. I thought he put on the best commentary performance of his career. He basically carried the show. He was the one that had the experience, and he was more or less really controlling the commentary, and Flores was more as a backup. He was more of a color guy. It was Don West who was really selling everything that was happening and calling a lot of the action. Hats off to Don West. He really helped this show. I think that if it was Josh Matthews and Borash or Josh Matthews and the Pope, this show might not have been as entertaining. Don West really did a tremendous job. In my opinion, he was one of the MVPs of this show. Let's talk about the matches now. I think the work on this show was really solid. I think everybody put in the effort, and the early matches I thought were very entertaining. We had the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match, LAX defending the titles. This was a fun match, very entertaining, lucha style where anybody could tag anyone. And it was fun to watch. It was a spectacle. There were a few mishaps. You know, it was a little bit of a train wreck at times, a little bit of a cluster. But overall, I think it was kept together, and it was very fun to watch, like I said. You had Drago slipping on the top rope at one point. And in the second match, Eli Drake also slipped on the top rope. But beyond those few botches, I think that the match was very solid. LAX ended up retaining the titles. After the match, Conan cut a promo and said that there would be a new member of LAX, and I figured we would see something happen here at the end of the show. But I'll get to that as we go through this card. We had D'Angelo Williams and Moose against Eli Drake and Chris Adonis. I mentioned the little botch by Eli Drake, but other than that, this was a very smooth match, and hats off to D'Angelo Williams. He looked really good in there. For a guy who has little pro wrestling experience, he went in there and he was very respectable. He hit the moves well and he looked really good. I think the guy does have some legitimate potential to be a star in wrestling. I think he really showed something in this match. This was entertaining. This was a fun match. As I expected, Williams and Moose won, which was the right finish here. And you had Williams actually doing a frog splash onto Adonis. They tried to do it through the table, but the table did not break. Afterwards, Moose decided Eli Drake is going through the table, and he hit the power bomb and sent Drake through the table. So it was a nice, fun moment to see somebody go through the table. Next up, we had EC3 versus James Storm in a strap match. I thought that this was an entertaining match. I thought it was a well-worked strap match, and I thought both guys looked good. You had EC3 bringing out the handcuffs, and the tables ended up being turned. It backfired on him. You had James Storm whipping EC3 something like 32 times to get his payback. But then you had a moment where EC3 momentarily took off the strap and then ended up pulling Storm into the ring post. When they got back in the ring, Storm hit the last call super kick, but ended up passing out. I guess the idea was that something happened when he went into the ring post. That was the story of the match. EC3 took advantage and ended up pinning Storm to win, which was fine. I figured EC3 would win if he's going to be challenging the champion at some point. I expected this finish, but at least Storm did get somewhat of a revenge by whipping EC3 like crazy. So I thought this was well done. I thought that this was a good match. Next up, you had Jeremy Borash and Joseph Park against Josh Matthews and Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. Initially, I was disappointed because Steiner came out. He was wearing a shirt. He did not cut a promo. But this match was a very pleasant surprise. I was extremely entertained by it. Basically, what they did, it was similar to Delete or Decay, where they started the match in the ring. They went to the back, and then it became a Final Deletion style movie where you had, first of all, you had Scott Steiner just being scary as hell. He was grabbing the barricade, pulling the barricade apart, and he held it up. You had Borash and Joseph Park running for their lives. Scott Steiner like a madman with the barricade, chasing them to the backstage area. And then you had Steiner and Matthews getting in a golf cart and chasing Borash and Joseph Park while Scott Steiner is yelling fat asses at them. This was great. And then they got into a car and started chasing Borash and Joseph Park. Same thing, Steiner yelling out fat asses at them. Somehow this led to Borash and Matthews fighting into a swimming pool, and Shark Boy, of all people, appeared in the water and attacked Josh Matthews. This sounds really silly talking about it and recapping it here, but it was actually very entertaining. It was well done. I think that this was maybe Borash's way of trying to show the world, hey, you know, I had a role in the success of the Broken Hardys gimmick, because this was very similar to the Final Deletion skits in 2016. But anyways, back to the match, if you want to call it a match, whatever. You had Father James Mitchell making his return to Impact Wrestling, confronting Joseph Park, and then we got back to the ring where we had a 2-on-1 situation. Borash was by himself, and all of a sudden you had Abyss with Father James Mitchell coming out. You had the thumbtacks, you had Josh Matthews being slammed into the thumbtacks, and then you had JB doing a big splash off the top. JB got thumbtacks in his hands. That was funny. And the good guys won. And I was hoping this would be the end of it. This would be the end of this storyline, but unfortunately it looks like JB and Matthews are going to be doing commentary again on Impact Wrestling, which I'm not a fan of. Like I said at the beginning, I think Don West needs to be back full time, and maybe Robert Flores as well. I think that they were way better as a team than Matthews and the Pope and Matthews and JB. But, you know, this definitely exceeded my expectations. And next up, we had the Full Metal Mayhem match, which I thought was really good. But if I had to criticize it at all, I would say that perhaps it was a bit too short. It felt like it was a really short match. And also, it was really fast-paced. And I actually think maybe some other match should have been between the Steiner match and this one, because it felt like the Steiner thing was moving so quickly, and then this match was moving really quickly, that you actually could have benefited from some sort of a buffer match. But that's nitpicking. I mean, this was really entertaining, and they kicked it into high gear right away. You had Edwards and Alicia attacking Davey Richards and Angelina Love before the match could even get started. And this was a lot of fun. They did some cool stuff in this match. The good guys, or should I say the good guy and gal, the baby faces won, which I would expect, for the feud for months and months. The bad guys, heels, I should say, bad guy and bad girl, were getting the upper hand, and it made sense for the baby faces to win here. Davey Richards looked good in this match, and the finish was Eddie Edwards doing a sunset flip powerbomb off the ladder through a table to Richards, and it was a cool finish. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and I thought it was well done. Then you had the X Division title match. They started slow, feeling each other out. Crowd did the dueling chants. Low-Key picked up the first fall with the Warrior's Way. Low-Key was selling his ankle, but he was actually playing possum and took advantage and got a near fall and done. I like the way this was booked. Makes logical sense, You have the challenger picking up the first fall, and the champion has to make the comeback, win 2 in a row. Makes sense. Good drama. Low-Key continued to control the match, and Low-Key tried to do a Warrior's Way onto the steel steps on the outside, but missed. Dutt took advantage and made a counter to win the second fall. And then the third fall, you had Sanjay winning with a moonsault into a Warrior's Way, which was a really cool finish to retain the title. So again, I thought that this was well done. This was perhaps the most unpredictable match. I think I might have gone with Low-Key to win, but I said, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for Dutt to lose right away, even though it felt like Dutt won just so they could get that feel-good moment in India. But I like the fact that Dutt retained the title here and had a successful title defense, and this was a good match. So we had a pretty solid streak here, a really solid show, in my opinion. Up until this point, the best TNA pay-per-view in many years. They really haven't had that many pay-per-views, but I would say the best TNA show in many years. Then I think the show went downhill pretty significantly. The women's match. For me, this was the biggest disappointment of the show. You have a unification match, and I think that this match did not need outside interference. It did not need to be overly complicated. It should have been straightforward with a clean finish when you're unifying the titles to give those titles or give the unified title some credibility. You had Gail Kim coming out to hold up the 2 titles, which was a nice touch, but it was all downhill from here. Rosemary, I'll get to her in a minute here, but you had Laurel Van Ness coming out, and by the way, not a fan of this whole gimmick she's doing with the wedding dress. I think it's lame personally. I don't see any marketability in it. I just not a fan of it. But anyways, you had her coming out. The crowd booed. The crowd was not a fan of this either, the idea of outside interference. And it was early into the match she came out. You had Sienna yelling at Van Ness, and Van Ness was escorted to the back. And then you had her coming back out again later in the match. And the crowd seemed to not enjoy the fact that there was all these distractions and shenanigans. Sienna used the belt, but Rosemary kicked out. And then Sienna used Mist on Rosemary and then put a submission on, which led to Rosemary tapping out. So I wasn't a fan of this because going in, you had Rosemary coming out. The crowd was really into her. She had this big entrance with all these different women dressed up like her. She came off like a star. So I think this was a big misstep to have her not only lose, but to lose by submission. Now, I get it. I understand the logic in having the GFW champion win if you're going to be calling this promotion GFW moving forward. I get that, but having Rosemary tap out like this was not a fan of it. And I think that whatever momentum she might have had going into this match, I think was lost. I think the company actually had a chance of maybe making a real bona fide female superstar here, and it's gone now. Just like that South Park meme, and it's gone. Then we had Jeff Jarrett coming out, thanking the fans. I mean, whatever. I get it. You come out there for the 15th anniversary show. But I don't know. Just something about it came off as very insincere and just Jeff Jarrett working the fans, saying, oh, yeah, thank you guys for everything, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't know. It just felt very political to me. Did not really feel authentic. I didn't really feel like he was speaking from the heart. I felt he was just saying that because that's the thing you got to say on the 15-year anniversary show, and when you're desperate to get people to invest in your company and give it another chance. But anyways, I digress. We have the main event here. Bobby Lashley, the Impact Champion, versus Alberto El Patron, the GFW Champion. You had King Mo out there in Lashley's corner. Dos Caras in El Patron's corner. Really did nothing for me. I'm not going to say this was a bad match. I thought it was fine. But I did not think it was anything special. I thought it was just two guys going out there and having a wrestling match. And I think they needed to do more. I think it needed to be better. It just did not feel like it was anything special. And I'm going to go ahead right now and say it was not 1,000 times better than Lesnar versus Joe, which hasn't even happened yet. But I say there's pretty much no chance of Joe and Lesnar having a worse match than this. Again, I don't think it was a bad match. I just thought it was okay at best. And, the outside interference, again, wasn't necessary. The stuff with King Mo being chopped by Dos Caras and then getting low-blowed. I mean, isn't King Mo supposed to be like this major MMA badass and he's getting beat up by some old guy in a mask? I don't know. I'm not the one in charge, so who am I to judge? But I thought the match was okay. El Patron won with the double foot stomp. They kicked out of some moves. Fairly typical stuff. I figured they were going to do some sort of big angle, at least for the finish or maybe post-match, to get people invested in tuning in to Impact Wrestling this coming week. Some sort of cliffhanger, But instead, we just had the Jarretts coming out and celebrating with El Patron, and that was the end of the show. And for me, it felt pretty flat. I think, if it was me, I would have done some sort of big cliffhanger. Maybe not during the match itself, but afterwards, do something to give the fans a reason to tune in to Impact Wrestling. Give them something that's going to keep them on the edge of their seats. And we didn't get that here. El Patron celebrating as the unified champion. Not really a big deal for me. So yeah, overall, I would say this was definitely a good show. Thumbs up show, definitely. But I think at the end, they dropped the ball, I think the show lacked the real strong storyline advancement, especially in the main event, to get people invested in the future and giving the company another chance. But I would say definitely check out the Full Metal Mayhem match and check out the tag match with Borash and Joseph Park against Steiner and Josh Matthews. That was a lot of fun. And really, the first 2 hours, up until the last two matches, I would give the pay-per-view an A. After that, I think the last two matches brought it down to a B+, maybe a B. So that's my thoughts on the pay-per-view. What did you think if you saw it? What did you like? What did you not like? Are you going to give the company another chance? Are you interested in watching Impact Wrestling? Leave your feedback, your comments. Let me know what you think, and stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest regarding the fallout. We'll have spoilers of the upcoming Impact Wrestling tapings up on NoDQ.com. You can check that out this week, and I will see you guys next time.